Welcome to another episode of What the Hell. Today I'm going to talk about plastic welding, the little talked about art of plastic welding. Now you may have heard of metal welding, like MIG welding, TIG welding, or arc welding. Basically, it's all about melting two pieces of metal and fusing them together. Well, that's basically what plastic melting is. You're melting two pieces of plastic and fusing it together to form one piece. Now, when you're working with electronics, when you're opening up cases, you're bound to break pieces of plastic like tabs or screw holes or gears. Now, so plastic welding is a really very important skill to learn, so that when you come across with a broken piece that you need to put back together, instead of gluing it together, you could just weld it together. And welding is much stronger than gluing, and it's quick. So today I'm going to show you a little bit about plastic welding. Now, there are many different types of plastics that you need to be aware of, and it's very important that when you bond two pieces of plastic together that they are of the same type. Otherwise, you may have problems with delamination, or pieces just won't stick together at all. Here I have different types of plastics. This one's POM. Most plastics, electronic plastic, will have a stamp on them of what type of plastic they are. So like this one is POM or Delrin. And this one's polycarbonate. And this one's polypropylene. Very soft plastic, very pliable. And this one is a glass reinforced plastic, the toughest plastic to weld. You could sort of see the glass fibers on it, on the surface. First, I want to demonstrate to you an instance where you might come across a broken piece of plastic. Let's say you have something like this. This one's a keyboard armrest that I have laying around, so I'm gonna sacrifice this. So let's say you want to open this piece of plastic. So you take your most electronic plastics, they, instead of having screws that hold pieces together, they'll have interior tabs inside that hold it together, so it's very hard to open them. So the only way to open them is to pry them physically. So in here I will use my screwdriver to pry it open. So this one comes apart fairly easily. So a situation where you might come across where you break a piece of plastic is these plastic tabs that I'm talking about. There. So sometimes these pieces just get brittle or weak and they break off as you try to pry open the plastic. So I'm gonna purposely break these pieces. Like that. So now that part is broken off. And I'm going to show you how to put it back together. So basically what I use is my trusty soldering iron with a flat wedge soldering tip. That's all the tool you need. Now, when you use a soldering iron tip for plastic welding, there's no way you'll be able to use it for regular lead soldering ever again, because the plastic will just burnish into the metal and there's no way you could remove it afterwards. The solder will no longer stick to the metal, unless maybe you take a piece of sandpaper, which basically ruins the metal anyway. So it's best to use a separate tips for plastic welding and for separate tips for lead soldering or silver soldering. So right now I have my soldering station set to close to the lowest temperature. So there's no set temperature that you need to adjust. You just have to go by feel. So you have to do tests to see, okay, what temperature does this piece of plastic melt? Because different plastics will have different melting temperatures. So you'll just have to test as you go along. So this one's fairly simple. And sometimes if I need help in making sure everything stays still, I will use a helping hand like this one, which has two gator clip arms that will hold my two pieces together while I solder it, so everything stays put without moving. But for now, I'm just going to use my hands to hold this piece together. Too bad it's hard to show exactly what's happening here. Let me see if I could zoom in. Okay, that's where the part broke off. Basically, what you want to do is slowly melt the base plastic and the broken piece and fuse them together as they melt. You don't want to fully melt it. You have to go slowly. Like, is it gonna focus? Hopefully that's focused. Like melt just this one side first and fuse that together with the base plastic, and then go on the other side and melt this side. It's really hard to show exactly what's happening. See how quickly I welded that? No need for waiting for glues to dry or to hold it in place while the glue dries. This one's instant. And it will prove to be much stronger than glue itself because you're basically bonding plastic with plastic as opposed to having an interface of glue in between the plastics. So if I wanted this to make sure that it's much stronger, I would take up perhaps an extra piece of plastic. Let's say that I have an extra plastic that I have laying around. I would melt some of that plastic off, so that now it's resting on the tip of my tip, as you can see. So right now I have a molten piece of plastic on my tip, and I will use that as a paste to go over where I previously repaired to build up that material over there. And that will make the bond much stronger. So I just keep doing that, building it up as I see fit, and then I may do it on the opposite side as well. Do it on this side, and then do it on this side. It's really hard to show on camera, especially with these black plastic. So that's one instance of plastic welding. Okay, Here's a, okay, hopefully this one will show much better. So this one's a polypropylene from a printer ink cartridge. This is probably my favorite plastic to work with because it's easy to melt. So let's say I have a broken piece of plastic made of polypropylene like that, and I want to weld it. First, I'm just going to use this metal as my welding surface so I don't melt my rubber mat here. So basically with plastic welding, here's what I'm doing. I'm melting the surface and then I'm wiping it, moving the plastic, moving it around, like almost like mixing it. Let me zoom in. So I'm gonna melt this plastic slightly. So I still have the previous black plastic from the other piece, so it's sort of melting together. So this is basically what I'm doing with plastic welding. I'm melting the base metal, the base plastic, and just moving it around. It's like mixing it. And that's what you want. You want to mix both plastics. To ensure that they are fully mixed and to leave a nice smooth surface. Which is also important that you set the temperature to the lowest temperature that it will melt to prevent any burning or smoking. If the plastic starts smoking excessively, then the temperature is probably too high. So in here you could see it's not even smoking. And it hasn't turned black or start to char. So this is perfect temperature for this polypropylene. So you could see the paste that it's creating when I'm melting it. And then I'm just mixing it. It's almost like mixing paint with a spatula. So I'm gonna bond these two together. So when you melt the plastic with this chisel, the plastic wants to move away as you press it down with a tip and it melts it. So it creates like a V notch or a V channel. Like that. Which is fine, it bonds the plastic just fine, but it thins the plastic. So that's why it's very important that you do the mixing like what I did here, and then smooth it over to rebuild the surface back to the original thickness, or even ideally put more plastic on top. So over the years of working with different types of electronics, I've collected a few pieces of plastic that I use as an extra piece. So that's pretty good. So after I do one side, I usually go to the opposite side and do that as well. See, this one, the crack is still there. I didn't heat it up all the way that it melts all the way through, which you don't really want because it makes it harder to work with. You just want to melt a little piece or a little section at a time so that the piece remains intact. It's not all melted and starts moving around. No glue can glue a piece of plastic like a polypropylene. Polypropylene is a very slippery piece of plastic. I have not come across a glue that will bond it properly, like as strong as like welding it like this. See, that's strong. That's almost as strong as original. So let's say I have an extra piece of plastic, polypropylene like this. I will melt some, create a paste. I call it a paste, like so. And then I will use that to just, I don't know what you would call it, just paste over the work area, just to build up the surface, just to make it stronger. And that's good enough for this demonstration. Okay, next. This one is a glass reinforced plastic. These are tough to glue because of the way the fibers are embedded in the plastic. Normally when they mold this plastic, they melt the plastic in the glass, and the glass fibers are interlaced or interlocked together. But when you're plastic welding it, the fibers don't get interlocked the same way as the original. I mean, they will bond together, but I find that it's not as strong as I would like. Okay, I've just broken a piece of that plastic. So you could sort of see the glass fibers. And when you're working with glass fiber reinforced plastic, you could feel and you could hear it's almost like sandpaper. You're the scrubbing action of sandpaper. Like like a scratchy sound. I don't know if the camera could pick that sound up. Let me see. It's like a scratchy sound. Okay, let me glue this quickly. Also, glass reinforced plastic also melts at a higher temperature, so you'll have to adjust your temperature accordingly because the glass really absorbs all that heat. So with practice, you'll get close to perfection when working with this type of plastic. See, it's hard to show on camera, but it's on there, but barely. So with a little effort, it can work. You can bond glass reinforced plastic. But once again, it's my least favorite plastic to work with. And this one is polycarbonate. So I've used this quite a few times, used it as a spare or a sacrificial piece of plastic. Also, if you get good enough, you could also glue pieces of broken gears that have broken tooth. You could melt those teeth back together using a smaller tip, like this size. Instead of the wedge flat tip, use something smaller to rebuild these teeth back together as a last ditch effort. If you can't find a replacement and your only option is to rebuild it, this is the best way to go. All right, I think that will be it for today. Thanks for watching. I hope you've learned something about plastic welding. Until next time.